Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, women and girls are facing rampant rape and deadly violence as humanitarian conditions in the country worsen. Also, how do you raise little boys in the Me Too era? And is it physically possible to change views on gender at such a young age? We'll be putting that question to leading American neuroscientist and gender specialist Dr. Lise Eliot. And the photo that tells more than 1,000 words. We meet the young Afghan mother whose image went viral. But we begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is witnessing a horrifying escalation of violence in a country where an estimated 13 million people are now in need of humanitarian aid. The African nation has been continuously affected by a series of conflicts over land, resources and power between various ethnic groups. And as is the case in any war zone, women and girls are once more becoming a target for rape and other forms of violence. Catherine Viette has the story.
He's a celebrated gynecologist who's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize 3 times for his work in helping victims of gang rape. Now Denis Mukwege is raising the alarm over the rise of sexual violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's not just women who are being targeted.
The profile of the victims has changed. Today we have many more children being raped. The percentage of children raped is increasing, and that worries us a lot.
At his 450-bed Panzai hospital in the city of Bukavu, Mukwege treats victims of sexual violence. They undergo reconstructive surgery and receive holistic care. Some survivors have been raped more than once.
The second time I was in the house, there was a noise outside. When I went out to see what was going on, they pushed me by force. They raped me in front of my child and told my child to watch.
Meanwhile, the UN is warning about a growing humanitarian catastrophe in the DRC, as renewed fighting in the east has claimed a number of casualties. The uptick in sexual and ethnic violence has caused many to flee their villages. The UN says the number of internally displaced people has more than doubled since last year as a result of the ongoing hostilities.
With the event of the Me Too movement, questions are now being asked about how to raise little boys in an environment where cultural values about sexism are changing rapidly. And is it really possible to change the behaviour of little boys? Joining me now from Chicago is leading neuroscientist and gender specialist Dr. Lise Eliot. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Eliot. First of all, just how significant are biological differences when it comes to behaviour carried out by little girls versus little boys?
Well, it's still very much of an open question for research, but we have been studying child gender behavior for a long time now, and of course boys and girls do behave quite differently by about 3 or 4 years of age. You don't really see that in the first year of life. There is very little difference in behavior, in the milestones that boys and girls exhibit. And so, of course, the issue has always been, is this a matter of nature or nurture? And so when people say biology, my response is it's all biology because we behave with our brains. So the issue is whether it's hardwired from birth or whether boys and girls behave differently as a result of the learning that they've undergone in the first few years. And my main research is on brain development, and so I can tell you that an enormous amount of our behavior is learned from experience at the moment of birth. So the degree to which boys and girls behave differently, in my view, is largely shaped by their learning and culture and innate factors like testosterone and genes probably just tip the balance a little bit in one direction or the other, but they really aren't a hard and fast determination of whether one will be more masculine or more feminine.
So what you're saying is that boys are not necessarily hardwired to be more aggressive and less empathetic, for example?
Not at all. We know every child is naturally aggressive. At the age of 2 or 3, a majority of children will kick or bite or hit to get what they want. A few more boys than girls, but all children learn between the ages of 2 and 5, or most children learn that it's not appropriate to be aggressive. And at the same time, I believe most children are naturally empathetic. If they have been cared for in a loving manner from birth, that is what they understand about human interaction. So boy or girl, children are naturally caring and loving. We see that in the way they treat their pets. We see that in the way they treat younger siblings and younger children. There is a very natural empathy. It's just that we cultivate it more in girls, and we cultivate aggression more in boys when we sign them up for football games or just turn on the television and they can see who's being aggressive, who's got the guns, who's being the warriors and who's not. They learn pretty easily that aggression is rewarded in males and it's punished in females.
But as we're seeing, certainly with the hashtag #MeToo social media campaign and the discussion that's now ongoing, cultural mores are changing when it comes to sexism, aren't they? So what you're saying is that both parents and teachers can in fact do a lot to teach little boys to be less aggressive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one could argue that is the purpose of child rearing and education, is we're civilizing our children. And as I said, it's true as much for girls as boys. Girls are naturally, all children are naturally selfish when they're little 1 and 2 and 3-year-olds. They want what they want and they don't necessarily want to share. But girls do seem to pick up the message more quickly than boys do. They learn more quickly not to aggress. And I believe it's because they have less conflict in the environment. They get a very consistent message that aggression is bad, whereas boys get a somewhat conflicting message between when they're told not to hit and fight, and yet they see throughout the world that the most powerful men, the most revered men, are often the most aggressive and assertive and physically intimidating.
Now, we know evolution affects the human physique, for instance, and as you're saying, biological differences really amount to a small percentage in terms of determining different behaviour between the genders. But given those small differences, are we still capable of changing the way we are wired, especially when it comes to raising children?
Most neuroscientists really reject the idea of hardwiring entirely. The human brain is not wired up at birth. It is dependent on its environment, its social interactions in order to wire up. And I'll tell you, the best example that most people can relate to is language. So whatever language people speak to you from birth, you will effortlessly be able to speak the language, know the words, pronounce it with no accent. And of course, we do this entirely unconscious. And so much of our gender behavior is just as cultural as language learning is. We adopt the behavior patterns of those we know are most similar to us. So boys model themselves after men and girls model themselves after women. There's tremendous room for change. And I think the whole transgender movement is really proving that. There's 10 times, maybe 100 times more people who identify as transgender today than 30 years ago. And I don't think that's because of any genetic change. It's because it's become more socially acceptable. We all have masculinity and femininity in our palette of behavior, and we express what is acceptable in society. So it's becoming more acceptable to be anywhere on the gender spectrum, because it's really a capability of every human brain.
Dr. Eliot, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Annette.
And finally, it was a photo that went viral and most likely resonated with working mothers the world over. That shot of a young Afghan mother nursing her baby in her lap as she took a university entrance exam. Clement Bonnereau reports on the story behind the image.
At first glance, Jahanta Bahmadi looks like any other young Afghan mother. But she's also a social media star thanks to this photo. The 22-year-old is seen here sitting on the ground, a baby in her arms, while taking a university entrance exam. The scene was so powerful that a professor took his phone and snapped a few shots, which he later posted on his Facebook account.
A baby in arms, a pen in hand, and a future full of hope that lies ahead. The child cries, screams, shouts, but the mother sat on the soil and was writing with hunger, responding to questions from the University of Nasser Khosrau.
The photo immediately went viral after striking a chord in a country where most women are illiterate and sometimes treated as second-class citizens. Jahantab travelled 11 hours, including 2 on foot, from her native village of Hoshto to the town of Nili to attend the exam.
My baby is too small and I couldn't leave her at home, so I decided to take her with me. Even during the exam, I couldn't leave her alone. She was crying. So I sat on the ground with her in my arms. I breastfed her and answered all the questions in the exam.
The literacy rate in Afghanistan is one of the lowest in the world. More than 3 times as many women as men are illiterate. Some 45% of Afghan men can read and write, compared to just 18% of women. Jahantab's dedication paid off. She passed the exam with flying colours. A crowdfunding campaign is now underway to help her move to Kabul and pay for the tuition fees. It has already raised more than $14,000.
Another inspiring tale. And that's it for now, and you can connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. Thanks for your feedback so far, and yes, please do keep those story ideas rolling in. So until our next show, bye for now.